everybody, welcome to Country Girl with Kathy Jarvis. My name is Kathy and this is my garden. Now we are in what is called false fall right now, and that usually comes right before Indian summer, and it usually lasts about a week, maybe 2 weeks. And what it basically does is it kind of signals everything that winter is coming. So it's time for us to get out here into the garden and prepare it for winter. And a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, you need to harvest your crops that are ready to be harvested. Now your tender vegetables, they will not tolerate a frost. So you have to make sure you have all of those harvested, and as they die down, remove them. That would include your tomatoes, your zucchinis, your peas, your winter squashes, and pumpkins. These plants, as soon as they die out, you should pull them up. If they are diseased or have insects on them, put them in a trash bag and get them off your property. Don't compost them. If they're fine, then you can throw them in the compost. Now your hardy vegetables, now these will take a frost. I'll take all the way up to maybe 28 degrees Fahrenheit. And they can be left in the ground, and they often taste better after they've been in the ground, after the frost. And that would include things like Brussels sprouts. These stay in the ground. They're best if you put straw around them and kind of bury them up to the leaves in straw. And then you can just reach into the straw and get the little Brussels sprouts as you need them, unless you happen to have them in a greenhouse. Here's my little Brussels sprout. You notice I've got grass clippings around it right now, up to the leaves. Another crop that's good for frost is kale and your collards. Usually they taste a little bit better after the frost. Broccoli and spinach can also survive throughout the winter without much protection. And your garlic is planted in October and November, and it overwinters without any protection at all. Now your semi-hardy vegetables will tolerate a light frost, usually between 29 degrees and 32 degrees. This includes your cabbages, your Swiss chard. The outside leaves might get damaged, but the inside ones are fine. Your rocket, your leeks, your mustard greens, cauliflower, English peas. They will die when unprotected during periods of extreme cold weather. But row cover or greenhouse will help keep them going longer. Your root crops, such as carrots, turnips, beets, rutabagas, and parsnips, can remain in the garden after a frost, but you should really harvest them before the ground actually freezes. Potatoes can also be left into the ground, but should be harvested before frost. Once you dig your potatoes, keep them in a dry, warm area out of the sun so they can cure. Dry them in a single layer, turning them every day for about 2 weeks, and then carefully remove any of the dirt around them. Do not wash them. Make sure that all the vegetables that you harvest right now are cured, such as your butternut squash, your pumpkins, herbs. Herbs can be frozen or dried. Now, speaking about herbs are kind of a mixed bag here. Some of them are really hardy and others are really tender. Your sage is a perennial in most areas and does not need hardly any protection for the winter. Cut the branch or two back before frost comes, and that way you can have some for Thanksgiving. Rosemary is a tender perennial, evergreen, but in zones 6 and 7 it may need some protection, and in zones 5 and above you really need to bring it inside. Now I've had this rosemary plant for a few years, but I protect it every year. I throw a plastic sheet over this frame to turn it into a kind of a small mini hoop house to protect it. Now thyme is almost, you can't hardly kill that stuff. It'll die back and it'll come back. Parsley is a biennial, so it will make it through the winter for a light frost. But in zones 5 or colder, you'll need to cover it up on cold nights. They don't transplant very well because they have a really long taproot, which is another reason why they don't grow too well in containers. Chives are very hardy. I've had this chive here since 2012, I think. So if you want any to come inside, you can dig a small clump off the side of it, put it in the house after, well, you should do this after the ground freezes. Bring it inside in a cool, sunny spot, and it'll come back and you can harvest off of it through the winter. Basil is a tender herb. It will not stand any cold weather whatsoever. Oregano is a perennial that's somewhat hardy. With a little protection, it'll do fine. I've had one in the back that's 4 years old and just keeps coming back. Now the garden beds themselves, what are you going to do with them? Once the crops, I need to harvest the green beans again. Once the bed is bare, like this one, you'll notice that cucumber finally died out. I have the choice of either putting something in it for a fall garden, or I can just put it to bed. Now most people put compost on in the spring, but right now it's the best time to put the compost or the manure on the bed. That way throughout the winter it can, the nutrients can work their way into the soil. So you can add a couple inches of compost to this, then cover it with a slight layer of straw or mulch to prevent any weeds from coming up. Another option is to put a cover crop in here and just leave that grow throughout the winter, and then turn it over come spring. But my option that I usually do is I usually put down some compost on here, and then I'll put either black plastic, cardboard, or weed barrier over top of it for the winter. You can also use oak carpet if you have oak carpet. But that's how I put my beds to bed, and I'll be doing that to this one probably today. I've got the compost up there ready to go. Now another thing that you should take care of right now is your berry patches. Your raspberries, should be, got cats running around entertaining me as we're working. Okay, back to the blackberries and raspberries. The blackberries, you should remove the old canes that the berries grew on. You'll tell which ones they are because they're going to be the dark ones, the ones that have no life to them, and your nice ones you should leave. So you need to do that. If you have summer bearing raspberries, leave about 6 of those strongest canes for every 1 foot of your patch. You should plant the blackberries in the fall, if you have any. Mound up the soil around the canes to prevent hard frost from heaving them out of the ground. Many of your blueberry varieties are hardy, but they would appreciate a thin layer of straw around them. And your strawberry beds should be mulched with straw also. So that's what we need to do in the garden. But you know, it doesn't stop there. You got perennial flowers that you need to take care of. You need to take care of the flowers also. Water them well in the fall. That way they'll be going into the winter with a good water supply. Many of the perennials you can just leave as they are, especially if they have a good head of seeds on them, because the birds will enjoy eating those, such as coneflowers and the black-eyed Susans. However, there are some perennials that you really need to cut back to help prevent spreading diseases. And this would be bee balm especially, your phlox, and your hostas. So most of my garden, my bird garden, will be cut back. But you do not cut them back now. You wait until the ground has frozen hard and all the foliage is dead. And you leave about 3 inches of stem, and then you mulch it all with the either straw or shredded leaves. If you plan on putting in a new flower bed this year, next spring, you might cover that area now with heavy mulch, black plastic, or cardboard, anything to prevent the grass and the weeds from growing this spring. And if it's over a lawn area with grasses, cut that grass down as short as possible before you lay the cover over it. If you have mums out, you might consider bringing them into a sheltered spot, especially as their flowers fade. Water them well and put a thick layer of mulch over them to protect them, or bring them inside into a cool garage. With your dahlias and your glads, you need to actually go and dig them up once the frost has blackened the leaves. Pack them in a box with newspaper or peanuts, styrofoam peanuts, or peat moss or something to and store them in a dark place until next spring. So those are what you need to do with your perennials. Now I cut my irises back also. I cut them as if I was going to transplant them. I come down to 6 inches just because they're looking pretty ratty right now, and the tips of them are turning really brown. What are we going to do with them this winter? First of all, continue watering them, but stop with fertilizing. Do not fertilize 6 weeks before your average frost date. So find out when your frost date is. Ours is in October, so you would not fertilize them 6 weeks before that frost date. You stop fertilizing them. Remove any dead or diseased canes. After the first frost, you can mulch them with compost or leaves just above that swollen joint where the stem stalks meets the new growth. In areas where there's really bad winter, you may consider putting a cage around them with chicken wire or some type of wire cage, and placing chopped leaves, compost, dry wood chips, or pine needles around them. If you have climbing roses, before the temperature drops to freezing, you need to carefully bring the lone canes down to the ground and cover them with pine branches or mulch. And that will take care of your roses through the winter. Now these knockout roses, I haven't done anything to them at all in the winter time. But my tea roses around back, those seem like they're a little bit more tender, so I do have to take care of them a little bit. Okay, should I do anything with the trees or the shrubs, you're wondering? They are looking really overgrown. Should I do anything with them? No. Do not prune your fruit trees or your shrubs at this time. If you prune them, they will leave open wounds that may not have time to heal before the winter cold arrives. Pruning also stimulates the tree or the shrub to put out new growth, and any new growth that's put out right now will most likely be killed by the cold winter. If you get a lot of snow, you may consider covering your small trees or your new trees. Now last year I had persimmon trees I got this time of year. I put a burlap around the one to protect it. The other one I didn't. The one I protected lived. The one that I didn't get around to putting the burlap around died. And I didn't wrap it or anything. I just put 4 T-posts down into the ground and around the tree and wrapped the fabric around those T-posts. They did not touch the tree itself. And if it's really, really bad weather, you can put shredded leaves down in there to help also. You can also, for especially young fruit trees, wrap the bottom of the trunk with a pest-proof tree wrap. This will prevent the mice and other critters from nibbling on it. It also can protect the tree from any damage from freezing and thawing. If you're planning on buying trees for this fall or a live Christmas tree, go ahead and dig your hole now for it while the ground is still warm. Put the soil in the garage so it doesn't freeze. That way when your plant comes, you can put the plant into the ground and put the soil around it. Another thing you need to do is take care of your watering system. Water everything well. Keep an eye on the weather, and when you see it's going to be a frost or a freeze, go ahead and turn off the water system. Take your hoses and bring them inside. If you live in a fairly warm area, just unhooking them from the faucet may be all you need. But if you live in an area that has really, really bad winters and cold temperatures, you'll want to drain the hose and actually bring them inside of a building where they will not freeze. If you have to leave them outside, use an air compressor or something to push that water out of them so they don't have any water in the system at all. Especially if you can't bring it in. If it's an irrigation system or something, then blow it out with an air compressor to make sure that there's no water in those lines to freeze and bust them. Another thing you need to do is feed the birds. I know that might sound strange, but the birds help the gardener. You might not think of it, but they do kill your insects, and if you give them food, they're less likely to eat your crops. I found that by planting those red tiny tomatoes, that they left all my other plants alone. They just worked on those little red tomatoes, which was great. But you need to feed the birds this winter so you have them for this summer. And they like to have a high quality, fatty, soot type of feed. Now I have my whole complete bird garden has a bunch of feeders on it, which I will start feeding them as soon as the weather starts getting cold and there's no seeds left, no flowers left. I still have hummingbirds. I did not put feeders out this year for hummingbirds because I have planted a bunch of plants natural plants that draw them in. And I find that it's a lot easier on me not having to clean out those hummingbird feeders every week. And it's probably better for the birds to have natural food instead of having the artificial sugar that we're feeding them. Also, you need to go around and do general garden maintenance. Empty all the outdoor containers that keep them from cracking in the winter and turn them upside down. Water containers, bird baths need to be kept filled and ice free. You can get little solar warmers for them, solar water fountain that will keep the water moving, because moving water does not freeze as quickly as non-moving water. So if you have the ability to keep that water running, you're going to have a little area. Like I'll be turning this fountain back on here, and that way the birds can have water out of this fish pond. Another thing to do is make sure that you have all the attachments off of the hoses, all your spray attachments and stuff. Make sure they are drained of water. I made that mistake last year. I did not drain the one wand and it busted. So make sure your wands are off of the hose and drained. And I like to keep a bucket in the little garden shed that I just put all those in. That way I know exactly where they're at. Mow your yard as late as you can. As long as the grass is still growing, keep it mowed. You don't want deep snow to arrive in when the grass is really long, because that will actually mat the grass down and you'll end up with brown spots. If you have a bunch of leaves falling, use them. Don't just bag them up or push them out on the street. Use those as compost or shredded. If you can't use them and you haven't, if you haven't used any compounds, weed killer or anything on your yard, then you might ask your neighbor or a gardener if they want the leaves. They'll be glad to take them they'll come and get them for you. If you bag them up, they'll come and get them. But they do have to be on a yard that has not been chemically sprayed for weeds, because if they fall into that and it's been treated recently, then those leaves are going to have that on them, and you can't use those in your garden because you'll kill your seeds. So it's best to use those. They're basically gold. I mean, you can use them as leaf mowed. You can use them as shredded leaves, as compost, as mulch, or you can throw them in the compost pile as a brown part of your compost. So use your leaves. Don't just leave them on the ground. And if you do have to leave them, if you can leave them, shred them with a mower or something and then leave them. Don't leave them big leaves, because these will smother your grass. If you do have a compost bin right now, before the winter, you can wait until it gets to your first frost, but you need to cover it with plastic or a thick layer of straw before the snow falls. Drain your fuel tanks of your mowers and your power equipment once you're done with them for the winter, for the summer, or for the fall. Drain those before you put those in storage. Scrub down and put away any of your tools. I like to put oil on my tools if I know I'm going to be not using them for a long time. You can either use vegetable oil, you can spray them with Pam, that type of, or cooking oil. Or you can just get an old bucket and put some sand and some used motor oil into that sand and just put them in that sand. So those are 10 things that you really need to do in the garden before winter. And we're not even talking the house yet or the animals. We're just talking garden and outside garden maintenance. So that's what we are in the process of doing. We're also trying to finish up projects, last minute projects that need to be done. Making room inside the garage for projects that I know I'm not going to get done before winter, but I want to get done this winter. Like picnic table I worked on last fall. I did not get done. It set out under a tarp all last winter. If I don't get it done this fall, which is not a high priority right now because I made room inside the garage, I can bring it inside the garage and work on it during the winter when it's too cold to work outside. I can paint it in there, sand it in there, and have it all ready for next summer. Bring it out. It'll be perfect. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash down the other picnic table, the newest picnic table. I'm going to wash it down. Need to get all the weeds around that have grown. I need to weed the flower gardens. Replace any mulch that needs to be replaced on them before winter. I think that's about covers all the outside things that we need to do. Inspect the house, make sure I don't have to do any more weather stripping or replace any weather stripping. Anything that needs to be painted, like the little chicken coop. Also, I need to put plastic around the chicken coop. Not the outside run, but the inside run and the building itself on the openings, except for you leave a couple openings that you can close manually so they can have air circulation, but the majority of them will be covered with plastic to help keep them warm this winter. So those are the outside jobs that need to be done. We haven't even started on the greenhouse yet. Greenhouse needs to be cleaned out. The shade cloth needs to be removed. Clean off any mildew that you see on the inside or the outside. Clean the beds. Clear them out. Make sure the hose inside there, even make sure the attachment is off of it and that there's no water in the hose leading to it. And this becomes a daily thing because you have to keep watering out there. If you've got crops in the winter, you have to keep watering. But you water on days that are warm and not frozen. And then you have to drain the hose each time. So that's a little bit of a problem. I also need to finish doing the tomatoes. I have to take those and bring the hooks inside. Once those die down, I'll be bringing those hooks in and storing them. Right now I'm in a little pickle. I can't store anything in my garden shed because he's working on it. We have to race up out of the dirt, put floor in it, put my shelves in, and then I can move everything back in and put the stuff that goes in there during the winter in there. So we've been very busy this week and we've got a lot to do. This whole list I just told you are things that we're up to, we're trying to get done. So hopefully you will have a good fall. And hopefully we won't have a bad winter, though everything is leading towards that. The persimmon seeds are showing spoons, which means winter. Snow, lots of snow. The willy worms are dark black all the way through that I've seen so far. Also an indication of a hard winter. So we're preparing, and it's taking a while. So hopefully you're preparing, not only your outside things, but your inside. Make sure you have plenty of food for your animals, plenty of food for you in case you have to get stuck in snow or ice storm and have to eat at home, in case you get sick and have to eat at home and can't get out. So I urge everyone to try to do the best that they can. And remember, dream big, follow that dream. Stay busy, prepare for winter. And see you in the next video. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Thank you for subscribing if you have. If you have not, please consider it. Hit the bell icon so you know where I'm on next. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.